Thank you so much for accepting my paper and presentation as part of this extremely interesting conference. My presentation is based on the research I did 10 years ago for this book. It is a history of Finnish fashion photography, starting from the early years and stretching to the present day. I have been teaching history of photography since 1991 and felt that this could be my contribution to the more general history of Finnish photography. By the time I started, there was hardly anything written about Finnish fashion photography. I found only one article which was published in our local photo magazine in the 70s. It predicted that the commercial practice of fashion photography will fade away when the radical democratic forces take over the culture and society. Well, it didn't really happen that way, and we still have fashion photography everywhere. The title of the book, Muodin ikuistajat, is Finnish and it means eternalizing fashion. Finland may not be one of the leading fashion empires of this planet, but my research proved that about 100 photographers had earned their living, or a part of it at least, by shooting fashion. Some were active for only a short period, others had careers that spanned over decades. The three female professionals whose work I'm going to show you today also have very different careers. The first of these three ladies is Emmi Heldt-Fock. She was from a family that was half German, and she acquired her professional training in Germany, which, as Andrea said, was the center for photographic education by that time in Europe. She opened a studio in Turku, located on the west coast of Finland, in 1922. It was a portrait studio famous for skillful lighting and retouching, qualities that made it popular among the wealthy and urban in Turku. Atelier Irmelin was her studio's name. It doesn't really have any special meaning, it is just a name. She was running the studio until 1939, when Finland joined the Second World War, and she escaped to Sweden. After the war, she returned to Turku and continued her business until her retirement in the 60s. The studio was sold to a new entrepreneur who continued it, keeping the name Atelier Irmelin until 1986. There is a full room of her negatives conserved in Turku County Museum. Fashion was only part of this flourishing business, and she did it seasonally for two clothing factories, both situated in Turku. Those factories were established by the same time as her studio in the 20s. Silo was a tricot factory, and Kestilä made coats. I will show some of their advertisements later. But let us first have a look at those skills that made Atelier Irmelin and Emmi Heldt-Fock so successful. The black and white image on the left proves that she was well aware of the design trends on fashion photography of that time. This kind of Art Deco backgrounds could be seen in Vogue and other international fashion Bibles. They can be found in Edward Steihen's photographs and were common among European fashion photographers. An interesting detail is that in Emmi Heldt-Fock's case, they were made of paper. It was a cheap material that could be painted and cut to create circles and triangular shapes. Her favorite prop was a toy dog, seen here in the hand of the model. The other image is an example of her coloring skills. It is a black and white photograph, hand-colored, and then printed in a Silo advertisement. Color is, of course, an important issue in fashion, and the lack of colors was a big problem in early fashion photography. Some magazines started publishing colored images in their covers, but only in covers, as it was very expensive. And this opened up a platform for Emmi Heldt-Fock's colored images. She did not work alone, but had several employed assistants, some for retouching, some for photography, and some did also pose for fashion shots. But most of the models were high society ladies of well-known Turku families. Both of these images are ads for Silo. Some more examples of how her work was published. Kestila is emphasizing the practical qualities of the coat, and Salo's underwear are exemplary pieces of Finnish quality, whatever it meant by that time. The texts are in Finnish. Both ads are very modest and small. They are 1 or 2 columns wide and 5 to 10 centimeters high. And Kotiliesi is the first ladies' magazine in Finland, still published. Now this is also my bridge to the underwear photography, which was the niche of fashion photography so well suited for women. As the picture on the left shows, there were certain problems in presenting and photographing underwear. The models did not want to show their face. They did not want to be recognized from the images. That's why they often hide their face. There is an apparent tension in the situation depicted here. Underwear is the most intimate of all clothing, and if the photographer is a man, the situation is easily voyeuristic. It was not proper to pose for a male photographer, and the gestures aimed at hiding at least one identity can be seen as efforts to solve this tension so prevalent in the studio. In comparison, let us have a look at the bathing suit photograph on the right. There is no reason to hide anything, although the model is almost as undressed as in the previous image. This is, by the way, Emmi Heldt-Fock's picture. Bathing suits belong to the public realm, underwear to the private. And notice again the background, which is made of paper here. In this complex situation, gender was a privilege for Emmi Heldt-Fock. She could relate to her models in her studio in a very different way than male photographers could. No hidden faces and poses that are turning away from the camera and the spectator. There seemed to be a playful, relaxed atmosphere in her underwear photos. Instead of erotic tension, there are smiles and funny props, like the cat made of paper again and the yo-yo the model is playing with. She also mastered erotic poses when such were asked for. One can easily see an invitation in this image looking at the gaze and the pose of the model. This is actually confirmed in a text written in the 30s. The author tells how women in the countryside of Finland were waiting for the next Kotiliesi magazine to get practical advice for the homework, and how their husbands, the farmers, waited for the magazine to see Salo advertisements. Naomi Rosenblum has listed the elements of fashion photography in her History of Photography in 1984. There is always the garment, the reason why the photograph usually is taken. What becomes visible here is fashion itself. Models embody the ideal of femininity. Pose and gestures are used for inviting the viewer or for creating a distance. Glamour is a great example of keeping and creating distance in fashion photography. Decor means props and backgrounds, and they provide means to connect fashion to the world. Emmi Heldt-Fock was a studio photographer who never worked outside, on location, as they say in fashion photography. She was skillful in creating the lighting that emphasized the material of underwears. Her models embodied very much the idea of a new woman, described before. They were slim, short-haired, and still very feminine. Just for comparison, this is how men's underwear was advertised by the same time. This is just my opinion, but it's a pity Emmi Heldt-Fock was not assigned to apply her skills to men's underwear. Apparently, this is a very practical garment to wear while, for example, hunting. Notice the gun, which has been cropped out, as have the other parts outside the white lines as well. My second example is Märtha Söderholm, who was also working and living in Turku. Turku was a central place for Finnish fashion industries by that time. She was shooting fashion for only 10 years when she ran a studio called Studio Stagge with her husband Stig Söderholm. So it was a family business, very much of it. They had partly the same clients as Emmi Heldt-Fock did, but like Salo, but also some others like Neulom and Trickle. Her photographs show the situation of underwear photography in the 50s, after the war. Apparently, gender was still a privilege. She did fashion assignments very much in the same style as Emmi Heldt-Fock did. This is a Salo advertisement. A playful atmosphere, smiling faces, and sometimes funny poses. She also developed a new way to depict the transparent material quality of nylon, which was increasingly used in underwear. The garment was photographed on top of a light box, which emphasized the illusion of transparency. But she did not want to take credits for this new innovation and told that she made all technical decisions together with her husband, who is doing the industrial photography in Studio Stagge. She broke her hand in the beginning of the 60s and had to leave the family business. And Studio Stagge was closed after Stig inherited a fish processing factory and took over the leadership of it. So this was a very short history of fashion photography. This set of images shows that even in the 50s, male photographers still had and faced the old problems of identity and nudity and tried to negotiate them in sometimes very curious ways. Olavi Gunnari's model is dressed in a black bodysuit and wears a matching black mask. I don't know what was the main idea here, but, but one advantage is that the white underwear is nicely contrasted to the black bodysuit. I didn't get an occasion to ask anything because Olavi Gunnari was dead by the time I was doing my research, unfortunately. My third example is Claire Aho, and I was surprised that in our first speakers meeting on Thursday evening, one person did remember her exhibition, which was shown in the Photographers' Gallery here in London 2 years ago. Also, Claire Aho was working in a family business. His father, Heikki Aho, and father's stepbrother, Björn Soldan, started their documentary film company called Aho et Soldan in 1925, the same year when Claire was born. She studied journalism in Finland and learned the skills of a cinematographer in the family business. New professional opportunity came after the war when Aho and Soldan opened a color photography studio. The know-how and expertise of this field was almost lost during the war years. Heikki Aho did order materials and guidebooks directly from Kodak and was supervising his daughter. He checked with a sensitometer all images before they were given to clients. This quality control was essential for the good reputation their color laboratory soon earned. Fashion assignments were pouring in, since it was guaranteed that the colors of the garments did match and were correct. And Claire was the person behind the camera. She became a trusted professional for many ladies' magazines and fashion publications, and did also product and advertising photography. She's still alive, and a week ago we just celebrated her 90-year birthday. Here are some examples of the right colors that are matching the clothes. Eva was a ladies' magazine, and this is an advertising for an early clothing company. And this was Claire's contribution to the underwear photography, a short advertising film for Figura, a Finnish bra and corset company. These are stills from that film, and there apparently was some kind of narrative which is difficult to follow without seeing the whole film. I don't want to analyze this material more than this because I have not seen the film. We haven't actually found it yet. But even this material shows that not only in Turku but also in Helsinki, there was still a market for female photographers in underwear photography in the 50s. And here are the stills from that movie. It's very hard really to figure out what was the narrative here. Anyway, my conclusions based on the careers and pictures of these 3 female photographers are these. Gender was a privilege for early female fashion photographers because they had access to the motif which was not considered proper for male photographers, ladies' underwear. They could relate to female models, create playful scenes in the studio. They mastered delicate erotic posing when such was required. They had good sense of materials like silk or nylon and had skills to bring it forth in images. They acquired special skills, hand coloring and retouching of black and white negatives and prints in Emmi Heldt-Fock's time, the use of backlit table in the 50s, color process and cinematography in the 50s. So actually everything was okay, and we had women working as active professionals in the field of fashion photography. But what happened actually is that men took over the trade in the 60s. And this is how they did it. They had so-called new exciting ideas. One was movement. The models were put into motion. Max Petrelius was one of the most successful new photographers in Finland in the 60s. This is his work on the field of underwear. They mastered action and reportage. This was really not the realm of the old Finnish fashion female photographers. And the last thing was sex. There somehow appeared a more open erotic appeal and sexy poses in fashion images made by male photographers. And so by the end of the 60s, men had replaced women as fashion photographers. Claire Aho, who was the only one still active in fashion photography, of these 3 examples I have, moved to Sweden with his son, who is now promoting the work of his mother and the Aho and Soldan property. There are lots of books and publications about Claire Aho's material nowadays. And men ruled the business for the next decades, and female photographers lost the privilege they had had for over 40 years in underwear photography. Thank you.